Representative Jayapal, thank you so much for being with us here at KOMO today. Some breaking news that happened today. Kash Patel was just confirmed as the director of the FBI. Your reaction to that news?
Well, I think it's a very dangerous time for our country. This is not somebody who has respected the FBI's role, respected security and protections that the FBI provides. I did note that 2 Republicans voted against him, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. But I think this is a dangerous time for our country. There are a lot of people in positions that should not be there.
Do you have any actions, or what can you do on the minority side as working with the FBI, or do you have any guardrails planned to what can you do?
I mean, this is one of the big problems with the constitutional crisis that we're facing right now. We are in the minority. We are counting on Republicans to stand up for presidential overreach, executive power overreach. And that is not happening. You know, the fact that the president is slashing budgets, is going in contravention to congressional Article 1 powers that provide us the ability to actually appropriate money is a huge problem. And the fact that the vice president just said that they weren't even sure they needed to listen to the judicial branch, these are the checks and balances that make us a democracy.
And staying on that line, I want to ask about the federal employee layoffs, which it seems every day we're finding out about expanded layoffs across different sectors of the government. How are these cuts impacting federal employees in Western Washington, and what are you doing as representative to monitor that?
Yeah, we have about 56,000 federal employees who are affected immediately in our state, and I think that this is going to show up in every way that our constituents you know, are going to see in a daily life. National Park Service employees who have been fired. Social Security checks are going to take longer. We know the cuts to NIH and to research affect Seattle Children's by 30% of their research budget, Fred Hutch by millions of dollars, University of Washington. I was just at a rally yesterday around the cuts to the NIH budget. This is going to be devastation on so many levels, and I think Americans are going to see the consequences of these slash and burn, illegal, unconstitutional cuts.
Is there anything that can be done to protect some of those jobs here in Washington?
Well, again, this is going through the courts, so there are a number of court orders that blocked the federal funding freeze. There are a number of pieces that are still in the courts, and so we're working with the groups that have filed lawsuits, with the Attorney General, with the Governor, of course, and then using our platforms to try and draw attention to this. We're collecting stories right now. People who have been fired can call our office, share their story so that we understand what their situation was. I just heard from a federal worker who was fired because she was 2 months short of the quote probationary period, but she had gotten an excellent positive review and would have completed her probationary period with you know, all of the positive feedback from her boss, but she was cut solely because it was 2 months short, no notice, nothing, just called in and terminated. So those are going to go into the courts for sure, and we're going to do everything we can to support those cases.
This has been a divisive issue because there are many who feel the government is bloated and these cuts are necessary. What do you say to people, though, who say this is a good thing that they're slashing the federal workforce? Is there a balance to be struck there of streamlining government versus axing entire sectors?
Yeah, I mean, I have pushed for taking on the Department of Defense, which is the biggest agency with waste, fraud, and abuse ever since I got into Congress and before I got into Congress. And that is the only federal agency, for example, that has never passed a successful audit. And yet we continue to fund the DoD. So I'm all for taking on appropriate waste, fraud, and abuse, but you have to be thoughtful, strategic, targeted about which cuts you're going to do. And you can't just do them willy-nilly against the appropriations of Congress. And so if the Republicans really want to take on waste, fraud, and abuse, let's see a thoughtful way to do it. Let's see a working with Democrats on it. And I think everybody would want to do that. Of course there's bloat in government. We all know that. Nobody's against that. But what they're doing right now is randomly cutting things. I've even seen reports, I have yet to confirm them, of changing numbers of what the savings are from these cuts that are being done by DOJ employees. And I think we have to be very careful because the consequence to the federal government, this is not a software company. Federal government is massive. We have a lot of responsibility for critical things like the federal airspace. You know, we need to make sure we don't have plane crashes, that we're not destroying the FAA, that we're not destroying Social Security. All of it is to promote a tax cut for the wealthiest 1%. That's what they're trying to do the savings for by cutting the benefits and services that Americans rely on.
I want to ask about ICE and their ramped up enforcement and deportations. One of our frustrations as a news outlet is we've been asking for numbers. How many people are being arrested? Are deportations in Washington increasing? We've been told that information is just not available. We have seen ICE highlight a few select cases of criminals and people who were wanted for things like murder and sexual assault who they're arresting and deporting. As a federal elected official, do you have any insight on the scope of ICE's operation since Trump administration took over?
Well, they're not providing accurate data to us either. However, there has been some reporting. NBC just had a really good report on the fact that 41% of the people that have been rounded up and arrested and put into deportation proceedings are nonviolent, simply being picked up for being undocumented. And I should just point out to anyone who's listening that being undocumented is actually not a crime, it's a civil offense. And if it were a crime, then everyone would get an attorney, right? Because that's our criminal justice system. It's not, it's a civil offense. And so what they are trying to do is make it seem like undocumented presence is a criminal activity, and that all of the people who are undocumented, in fact, the president said this the other day, everyone who's undocumented is a criminal. That is just not true. The economy of our state would collapse without the work of immigrants who are here and have been waiting sometimes for 10, 12, 15 years for a path to citizenship. And so it's heartbreaking to see what's happening right now. Not only what they're doing, but the way in which they're portraying people who have been essential to our economy and to our communities.
Do you have any way of sort of forcing those numbers out of ICE to get a more accurate picture here in the Seattle area?
We'll continue to push. They don't have to give us anything. We send letters. We actually sent a letter just a week ago asking for the number of U.S. citizens who have been picked up in these arrests, because that has also been a thing. We know that people have been picked up essentially for just speaking Spanish. And so that we've been pushing for all of that data, and as the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, I'm going to continue to push for it, and I will let you know as soon as they comply with their congressional responsibilities, but so far they have not done that.
So, those are the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you would like us to share with viewers today?
Well, I think the only other thing I wanted to mention is we had an amazing town hall on Tuesday night at Seattle Town Hall. We had 2,500 people register. We only had capacity for 1,000, but it is live streamed, and I think it was really a prescription, hopefully, for people to understand what is happening. We will continue to do regular updates and what people can do. We really need people to be engaged in pushing back on what I truly believe is a constitutional crisis that we are careening into.